got to start with, I guess, officially the end of an era. The era was pretty much over, but there was a little bit of hope. And I'm not talking about Tom Brady right now. I'm talking about Sean Payton. It's, I think there are mixed emotions for those who pull for the black and gold today, because you allowed yourself to look at the Saints and what happened over the last season with Dennis Allen, and things just didn't go well. And there's discussion on talk radio, which probably was not warranted, but it certainly came from right here at times, about whether or not Dennis Allen will be back and whether or not Sean Payton would come back if he he was burned out and he wanted to take a year off and then jump back into it. Oh, lo and behold, the Saints gigs is going to be open. And that you allow yourself to think that way, because the Saints history is essentially a huge dark cloud and then a 15-year ray of sunshine. And so today you may look at it and go, man, it really is over. And that's okay if that's like a sobering feeling to you and you're like, oh, all right, well, he's headed to Denver. But what happened yesterday for the New Orleans Saints organization, not the Broncos organization, for the Saints organization, desperately needed to happen. Desperately. And this is coming from a non-Saints fan. That had to happen. Assets are what the Saints did not have, other than the contract of Sean Payton, which wasn't going to win you any games next year. It was an asset, but it's not going to win you any games next year. Now you've recouped some things, and you're in a better spot than you were. So, sure, be sad that Sean Payton's not coming back to the Saints. That's reasonable, because he was such an influential person and piece to the greatest run in the history of the franchise. And I think for some people listening to this, the most fun they've ever had watching sports. Now, if you're an LSU football fan, there have been more high highs, certainly LSU baseball as well. But if you're more a Saints fan than you are an LSU fan, that run with Peyton and Breeze is the best ever for you. Assuming you're not like a Tiger Woods golf fan or something. It was awesome. And as long as he's with Fox, you can open the door to having it back. And that's a reasonable expectation or thought to have, even though we now know it was never going to happen. But yesterday was a huge positive for the Saints. Huge, huge positives. And it would be easy to look at this and maybe try to run the speculation game, which I just don't do very much. I'm, one, not very good at it, and two, don't think it's very productive. But there's a space for it in talk radio and in the medium and the podcast world to speculate on things. We're about to play What If Wednesday here in 25 minutes. That's a lot of speculation. But you could say, Peyton and Loomis are best buddies, and they really wanted to make things work, and Peyton was just gonna do right by his buddy Mickey and jump in when he could. I don't think so. Realistically, Sean Payton is going to go for one more ride here. Didn't mean to throw a Broncos pun in there, but it just came out. This is it for Sean Payton, likely. I guess it's possible in 3 years it doesn't go very well and somebody else wants to pick him up or whatever the case may be. This is probably it for Sean Payton. He's a really good coach. You would assume that with the structure that is in that organization, and you've heard Jacob Hester talk about it. He went from the Chargers to the Broncos, a whole new world. Peyton Manning raves about it. Still lives in Denver. It's a strong organization. They'll back Sean Payton up with what he needs to be successful, and he'll probably win. So that's what he was jumping towards. Not, well, if I sit out another year, the Saints are maybe less leverage next year. I'm going to hurt them. That's bad for Mickey, and so bad for Dennis. My guys, let's get on with it. No, he found a spot he wanted to go, and they had some assets that the Saints could recoup. I'll be honest with you. Right when I heard this, I looked at the draft compensation. I said, okay, it's the 30th pick. It moves up to 29 because the Dolphins don't get to pick. 29th pick. That's not a quarterback spot. Certainly there are quarterbacks there. We know Lamar Jackson was taken right about there, and it can be done. But it's probably not. But my first thought was, uh-oh, here we go. The Saints have the 29th pick, and now they got their second rounder, and and they got an extra one in next year's draft. Now they've got a couple picks. Oh, God. They're going to trade these picks and try to get up to 12 to go reach on some quarterback. They're going to trade the picks, try to move up to 8 to go get Levis. That's my first thought, because that's the DNA of the Saints organization, isn't it? So, yes, it is wonderful that they've recouped some draft compensation, albeit, and not albeit, but they recouped draft compensation for someone who was not positively impacting the organization. It's not like you gave up a quarterback or a cornerback who, might help you. Sean Payton can't help you any. And you got a first-round pick for him. That's a big deal. But don't package these picks and immediately run up to the front, mortgage more draft capital to try to get a quarterback because you think you can get up to number 9. Just hold your horses for a second. Look at what the Saints were on the field this year. They were a team that really struggled to stop the run for the first time in a long time. They were a team that didn't rush the passer well enough this past year. They were a team that had the faces of their defense begin to show age. They were a team that battled depth at wide receiver because of injuries, a team that didn't have a quarterback. They were a team that was shuffling people all over the offensive line. And there are more decisions you're going to have to make on what of those guys from that roster you're going to bring back. You need to get younger. And it's so easy to look at the past of the Saints and say, hey, go get the best guy. That's fine when Breeze is 36. That's not fine now. And I know that Dennis Allen may feel like there's some heat on him and you got to go win right this second. That may not be realistic. Now, the other side of this coin, while I'm telling the Saints to hold their horses, use your draft capital, and try to get some young players that are on the cheap that can help you, which you didn't have as much access to 24 hours ago. At the same time, you look at the Tom Brady news, and you go, wait a second. Is it possible that the NFC South would trot out Andy Dalton, Kyle Trask or Blaine Gabbert, Desmond Ridder, and Sam Darnold? Is that what we're doing here? Because, that's a hell of a thing. The NFL is all about money and interest and storyline and creating all this buzz. They want to go play in London. They want to go play in Mexico City, go play in Berlin. They want to maximize the draft, make the combine a television event. Here's an idea. If the NFC South agrees to put Andy Dalton, Kyle Trask, Desmond Ridder, and Sam Darnold out there for a 17-game season, I'll just sweeten the pot if I'm the commissioner, get those 4 teams in and say, hey, if y'all use those 4 quarterbacks this year and any of y'all win 10 games, I'll double your salary cap next year. How about that? Because that is brutal football to watch. And you have to evaluate what your division is when you're putting together a team. If you're sitting there and you're in the AFC North and you're Cleveland, you know that Joe Burrow is going to be there for 10 years. You better put somebody on the field that can go get him. Just an example, like, you sometimes you have to play to your division. There's famously, people talked about Bill Belichick. The Jets were the second best team in the East, and they had Revis and Cromartie. So he went and got Gronkowski and Hernandez and said, all right, go guard our receivers nobody's ever heard of. Watch what these tight ends can do. So it, again, may be tempting if you're the Saints to look at your division and go, God, this is awful. We can win this thing easy next year. We just got to go get this guy. You're not there anymore. That's the Breeze era. When you got Peyton and Breeze, you can be a little bit more aggressive going to get piece A or piece B. When you got Dennis Allen and Andy Dalton and an aging defense and some decisions to make in the offensive line and likely no more Mike Thomas, why don't we use these picks? Maybe trade back and get a couple more. Lot of different ways to approach this thing. In my opinion, the Saints need to approach it like, we got a couple years to build a team here. That's the way it feels to me. But what happened yesterday had to happen for the Saints. Hey, thanks so much for watching the Hunt Palmer Show on YouTube. If you don't mind, throw us a like right below and hit the subscribe button. We'll see you next time.